ZTA phoned to say why, I said, because I'm too busy trying to run my business in an environment in which it's not easy to do business. Anyway, after several phone calls and with great credit to Tessa, she actually drove out to my office and sat with me for 45 minutes and convinced me that one should be here, that it's way better and way easier to change things from within than from without. So those colleagues who have chosen not to be here today for whatever reasons they may be, as opposed to unable to be here, it's always worth remembering that if you don't participate and you shout from the sidelines, your voice often will not be heard. So I'm simply being honest with you that I at first refused to attend today because I'm simply too busy trying to keep my business afloat. So in the spirit of that and what we've heard so far from the introductory speeches and in the spirit of the rapid results approach, I can tell you that by the end of the day, the Deputy Commissioner has told me there'll be no roadblocks across the country. I'm sure that's what I heard him say. Anyway, my apologies for my throat, my experience in the industry, but in other parts of the world, from my own business, of course, but from our industry. Those of you who know me know that I'm passionate about it, but you can't, I can't fill one bed in our business if people are not coming to Zimbabwe in the first place. And we all have to remember that. We have to put country first. You will see that I intentionally used an exclamation mark and a question mark on the first slide there, because today is about fixing those things. Where am I pointing this? Group producers called the Ease of Doing Business table. This I took off the internet yesterday, and I've just scaled it down to the Sub-Saharan Africa group, and it has 189 countries on it, and Zimbabwe sits at 155. You can see it in the yellow line at the bottom. Interestingly enough, I heard in the briefing session before we came out here that there's going to be a presentation later on this morning. Well, that's about Rwanda, and look what is at the top of Sub-Saharan Africa. In second place in Sub-Saharan Africa, you've got Rwanda. Now, if I say to you Rwanda, what springs to most of your minds? War and genocide. I'll come on to something in a minute that shows you what is possible in a country that has suffered far more than we've suffered, does not have the resources that we have, and what they've done in a few short years. It's quite remarkable. But we're at 155. Now, somebody may tell me that last year we were at 159, so therefore we've come up 4 places. Well, I've learned in my business life, don't compare with things below you. Aspire to be at the top of the list. Let's not use what I call LCD, lowest common denominator factors. Let's strive to make Zimbabwe right up at the top of that list, not say, but we came up 4 places, because 4 places is not good enough. Okay, we're going the other way, right. So, this actually is in, those of you who travel on SAA, this is the magazine that I took off a plane the night before last. This article is in there. It's called Rwanda Rising. I'm not sure how easy it is for you to read down the editorial down the side. It is remarkable, but later on, in fact, it turns out there's going to be a presentation about Rwanda as a case study for how things can be changed. The point I'm making is that we have every asset in this country to make ourselves an absolute shining star of tourism in the continent of Africa. There's living proof there that it is absolutely possible, and we should. I'm just going to touch on things that are currently impediments, things that make our lives difficult, and things that certainly are right now are the absolute opposite of ease of doing business. Statutory Instrument 64, importation of goods. And I nearly stopped and went back to my office this morning because I saw a billboard this morning that says, government to widen imports ban. That was this morning's billboard driving here. I pray that that is not true. But tourism does support local industry when the product, the service, the price is right. But of course we won't when those things are not in play. In the briefing room, I apologized in advance to anybody that I may offend, but I was told, no, this is a no-holds-barred meeting. So my next comment, Zimra attack on tourism, and I've put again in capitals because as of last week, we are under attack yet again for a number of issues that have gone all the way to fiscal appeals court before, and the industry won and or Zimra withdrew. And those things are now back on the table with several of us in this room with massive demand letters on our desks. So I ask the question, is tourism suffering from the golden goose syndrome? If it is, then we certainly need to change that factor. The banking environment right now, we all know it, we all suffer from it, but it causes huge impediments. We have to be user-friendly in the tourism industry. If we have to stand in a queue, I don't want to, but that's one thing. But you cannot make tourists do that. You cannot say to tourists that we don't have any cash, so you must bring cash. And by the way, you can only take $1,000 out, and if you don't declare it, we're going to arrest you and confiscate the money, etc. It's simply not the right environment for that. The business of online travel agents, OTAs, is huge in our industry worldwide. But the way that many of them operate is that we have to pay them their commissions from Zimbabwe. So they fill our beds, but then once a month they bill us for their commission. They are multinational companies. They're not interested in Zimbabwe's banking situation. So when we say, sorry guys, your money will come to you sometime next week, that day you are taken off the online sales platform. So we've suffered over this last few months, many of us have already suffered loss of business because we cannot guarantee payment to them timelessly. So those are the kind of things that we have to deal with. The police, the roadblocks, the behavior there is doing untold damage. Last count, 43 roadblocks between here and Vic Falls. In Victoria Falls itself, from the road to Kazangula to the Kingdom, you all know how far that distance is, there are currently 4 roadblocks in a small town like Victoria Falls in that 1 kilometer. I asked the question, why? I'm sure we'll hear later why. This, again, I don't expect you to read this. This is a letter from friends of mine who visited recently. Steve used to live here, went to school here at Mount Pleasant. He's in the tobacco business, lived in Singapore for the last 15 years. They were here for a wedding in May. This is a terrible account of how they were treated on the road from Harare to Beitbridge to attend a wedding. And there was 8 of them coming for 3 weeks in December. They were bringing friends and family. They have cancelled that trip as a consequence of that journey from Harare to Beitbridge in May of this year. Sir, I'll show you this letter afterwards. The police officer involved is named. But this is one example that we are receiving on a daily basis. And you'll see it on social media. It is a genuine problem for tourism. If we pretend it's not, then we are seriously burying our heads in the sand. This is, again, I'm using examples of my business. This is a letter that we had to send to Vic Falls Town Council last year on what they were doing to their rates and other charges. The Deputy Chief Secretary spoke earlier on about costs and the multiple issues that we have to deal with. And this speaks to increases in rates of over 350%, of other things at 35%, other things at 95%. It's simply not tenable. Again, I refer back to what the Deputy Chief Secretary spoke about. We are in a low inflation environment. So there can't be one hand over here and one hand over here doing different things. This is a table of comparative electricity prices and diesel fuel prices in the region. you can see amongst our neighbors, in both cases, Zimbabwe is the most expensive. Again, I can't comment on why that should be, but in a platform such as this, we have to take a good hard look at ourselves. What are the things that can cause us issues? Here I'm trying to highlight some of the things that we can do, that we should do. And in the spirit of the rapid results approach, by the end of the day and over the coming days, we should be able to take lots of things and get them actioned positively. And I'm sure with the combined brains that I can see around this room and the combined knowledge and experience and the colleagues from the enabling ministries here, that certainly we should be able to achieve many of these things. And of course it's things like Air Zimbabwe, long-haul flights into Vic Falls, our minister's campaign for UNWTO, which can raise and highlight our profile on the tourism world platform. The visa scenario we spoke about, destination marketing. If we can't fund ZTA properly, well then let's take the funds we've got and do the right thing with those funds. Longer stays, we have to build longer stays in the country. I nearly said Vic Falls then, but as some of my colleagues have said, Ross, remember that there's more to Zimbabwe than Vic Falls. Well, of course there is. But you could also say, you know, as an analogy, Nelson Mandela and Robben Island and Table Mountain are used continually by SA Tourism. Of course they are. We all use our prize assets to market. And so Vic Falls is a key issue, and getting that airport going will lead to growth in tourism. The SEZ bill for investment, let's get it going so that we do get more local and foreign investment into tourism. ZIMRA, the 15% VAT on foreign tourism introduced in January last year, which caused mayhem in the industry, and there's no question that it is doing damage. Let's take some of the ZIMRA resources and apply them to non-compliant businesses. Don't keep chasing the businesses that pay their tax and pay their dues on time. Is every property that's registered on Airbnb in Zimbabwe, are they paying VAT? Are they registered with ZTA? Are they paying their levies? Et cetera, et cetera. I come back to my point about the golden goose. Let's do the things that we can change. The roadblocks and hostile borders. I came through on Tuesday night back from South Africa. I went through the red route because my wife had bought some new linen for one of our bedrooms at home. I traveled early this month, so I was a good citizen. I went to the red route. I was the first customer in red route. 40 minutes later, with 4 different officers who, after they couldn't deal with the problem of turning the computer on, I finally put the money on the table and said, either you write me a manual receipt or I'm walking out the door. That was my own example of 36 hours ago. We can't do that to people. We simply can't do that at borders. It's not right, and it's utterly non-user friendly. Tourism thrives on being user friendly. Oh, which way are we going? Some of the background to what we are, what we have in this incredible country. 7 wonders of the world, one of the greatest rivers in Africa, centrally located. You look at a map of the bottom half of Africa, and I'm going to use those 2 words again, Victoria Falls. They are slap bang, it's the hub of Southern African tourism. It can be the feeder for the region, and certainly for the rest of the country. We're surrounded by incredible wildlife and natural resources. There's room stock in Zimbabwe. Lots of people believe that Vic Falls is absolutely thriving. Let me tell you, as busy as it is right now in high season, the destination will finish this year the country. So we can build tourism without building one more room yet. We just need more feet and people to stay longer. That's what we need. People will stay longer if we create the right environment. We've done a survey across the region in the last 8 weeks, and it's a survey that when we finish in a couple of weeks' time will be made available to the Ministry and to ZTA about Vic Falls and the region. There's an estimate of 400 to 450,000 tourists into that area in 2015. And it's as scientific as we've been able to make it, but therefore we need huge growth for the destination and for the region. If you look at Zimbabwe in isolation, it will be difficult to grow tourism. Tourists, long-haul tourists, want to travel to 2 to 4 countries on average when they travel long-haul, and so we need to be part of that bigger picture. Cape Town Airport, for example, they've increased their capacity 408,000 people in the last 9 months alone. We have the ability to do that. Cape Town and Vic Falls, Cape Town and Harare are obvious links. The positioning that we need to do, and possibly some of this will come into the next session, things that will make life better and easier for us. I'm conscious of time, so I'm wrong way again. I'm technically challenged. Destination image, which of course is the topic of the second session, but it has relevance to this. And earlier on, somebody spoke about reality and perception. Many factors involved, but it's vitally important that we accept that how the world views us is exactly what matters. What we think is irrelevant. How the world views us is exactly what matters in terms of tourism image. There is something called the peak end rule, and again, you can go and look it up on the internet. And that speaks to a situation where what is the highlight of a particular experience? And it particularly applies well to tourism. And generally it says that something in your holiday, you will remember seeing a cheetah kill. You will remember seeing a pride of lions with cubs. You'll remember a couple of incidents. But often what happens is the last thing that happens to you on a holiday is what you also remember as well as the peak. And in our case, the last thing is often an airport or a border. And we suffer here in Zimbabwe from not making sure that we manage the peak end rule well at all because of some of the situations that we put tourists in at our ports of entry. So those are things, again, that we need to concentrate on. And in closing, just a light-hearted comment that it speaks to people, but it can speak to the industry as well. It is not what you do for your children, but what you've taught them to do for themselves that will make them successful human beings. And we, the senior people here in this room, we need to hand over this industry in good shape to the younger people in the room. Where to from here? We know we've got an incredible country, remarkable people, and a wealth of natural resources. Surely the purpose of today must only be about fixing what is broken and creating the most user-friendly operating environment and tourism destination on the continent. Thank you.
For these and other stories, visit our website www.263chat.com. Follow us on Twitter @263chat and like our Facebook page 263chat.